Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andrews Groves, and today I'm joined by a friend of the show, Dalbin Osorio. Hey Dalbin, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me back on. I'm super pumped. Ready to talk Jets, 2 weeks before the draft with you, so I'm excited. Thank you for having me back on.
Yeah, it's really exciting time. Like I said, when we're recording this, we're less than 2 weeks away from the draft. It's crazy that we're almost there. There is nothing to talk about in terms of news. Everything is so quiet. So I thought, and the rest of the guys have left me to go off on Easter holidays and trips away. So I thought I'd hook up a guy who I had a great conversation with when we had the bye-week reviews. And I thought, yeah, who better to have a good chat pre-draft than with Dalbin. So, just to open it up, basically, the first kind of topic is just your feelings generally on the kind of end of the season, where we're at right now, free agency, and as we head towards the draft. So how are you feeling about things as we're a few weeks away from the draft?
Oh, good, man. Yeah, I think the Jets had a really good offseason. Adding Laken Tomlinson, right? DJ Reed, Jordan Whitehead, an under 25-year-old ascending player. I think Joe Douglas did what I expected him to do, right? He fortified the offensive line with somebody who's durable and who's a plus starter, right? Like, he didn't just get, somebody who, just durability and isn't very good. Like, you got somebody that's going to be in there and it's going to solidify that offensive line, right?
Yeah, you didn't get someone who's just not GVR, right?
Exactly.
You got someone who's a clear upgrade and a plus starter, as you said, yeah.
Exactly. So you get him, you get DJ Reed at one of the corner spots. So now you can have Brandon Echols and Bryce Hall kind of go at it for the other corner spot. You solidify the safety position by also not only signing Whitehead, but you also brought back LaMarcus Joyner, right? Who I think a lot of folks were excited about until he got hurt last year and we didn't get to see him, right? And I think that's also, I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday about like the Ravens, right? And the Ravens could have made no offseason moves, but they were getting so many people back, right? Like from injury, J.K. Dobbins, they were getting Lamar Jackson back, Ronnie Stanley, that by that alone, I think they would have been fine. The Jets also lost a lot of players to injuries. I think they were like second in the league in games lost to injuries, right? Like they lost their big marquee free agent in Carl Lawson. They lost LaMarcus Joyner, lost Vinnie Curry, right? They lost a lot of guys that were expected, Becton, right? They lost Becton. They lost a lot of guys that were projected to play big roles on this team. So now you get them back and now you've added more talent, right? So I'm really excited about that. I wish that Joe Douglas would have taken a swing at one of the receivers, but I think what you're seeing now under 2 weeks to the draft is a narrowing of the focus of what this team is going to take. Mm-hmm. And you're going to look at edge rusher, right? And you're going to look at wide receiver with 4 and 10. Hopefully. And I think barring any curveballs, right? And you know what? Actually, that's been the theme of the offseason, right? Has been curveballs, right? Like we didn't expect to see Devontae Adams traded. Tyreek Hill got traded, right? Like all these big names have been moved. So maybe there's another curveball 2 weeks before the draft, right? Where we see something else. Maybe Becton gets traded to Dallas for pick 24. Maybe that's something that you see. But I think we're in. I'm very excited because I think the Jets are giving Zach Wilson the chance. They're building it right, and they're trying to do it both ways, right? I think Joe Douglas's pursuit of Tyreek Hill showed us that he's not just going to stand pat and say, you know what, I'm going to hold on to all these picks. I'm not going to go get these guys. Like the fact that there's, they would be interested in Deebo Samuel or a DK Metcalf or a Terry McLaurin from the Commanders who could be on the move, right? And I think what you're also seeing, just to put up order, I think you're seeing this player movement where wide receivers are trying to dictate, like, all right, listen, man, this is who I want to play with, right? Devontae Adams wanted to play with Derek Carr. That's who he wanted to play with, so he made it happen, right? Like, even if he took less money or whatever the case may be than what the Packers offered, he was like, that's what I want to do. I think guys who don't have that security, and A.J. Brown, right, the second-round receivers who don't got the fifth-year option, you're going to see more movement from those guys. Like, listen, man, I'm not gonna attach my career to a Ryan Tannehill when I can go play with like a high-ceiling guy like a Josh Allen or maybe even a Zach Wilson, right? Who, again, not to say that they're the same, but there's much more variance in the chance of them being all pro quarterbacks than there is a Ryan Tannehill, right? Yeah. So I'm excited, man. I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, it's exactly how it's played out. I'm really happy with as well. Like, they filled in those needs. They didn't have to go crazy. You fill in the needs, and then in the draft, you've got so many assets. You can really hit best player available in the kind of the holes that you still have, or kind of places that you need to just get better at. So I don't see any pass rusher. Yeah, we're looking at, because it's probably our biggest hole, purely because we need someone across from Carl Lawson, and we still have the mystery of where Carl Lawson is. But I think it's still not terrible. If you look at that unit, if Carl Lawson does come back to full strength, it's not a terrible unit. Like, I don't see a really deficient unit across the board now. Obviously, that you need to improve in a lot of areas to be a really good team, but we don't seem to be one of those teams where there's like,
Mm-hmm.
a player who just can't start or who has no right starting in the NFL. So obviously injuries need to come in, and if you
Mm-hmm.
can bring in some people on top of that to fill out the depth, you're in a really good spot, and I think we are. So looking at the draft, are you really much locked in on taking a pass rusher at 4, no matter what?
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of I in September I said that Ike Ekwonu was the best offensive lineman in this class, and that was in
You were
September, right?
early on that one, yeah.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
really
and
critical, yeah.
and folks were like, "Well, what did Evan Neal do to you?" And I'm like, "Listen, man, there's a difference between him
Mm,
and Evan Neal, right?" And again, it's also you're splitting hairs, right? Like having one player ranked, like Ike Ekwonu is my number 2 player in this class, and Evan Neal's like number 7. Like it's not. We're not talking about like 2 and 45 or something like that,
right,
right?
yeah.
But Ekwonu brings a skill set that fits this offense. He's nasty, right? Like really good in pass blocking, really good in run blocking. I think also Evan Neal's size worries me because, again, we just kind of see that with Becton a little bit, right? Like he's a bigger, heavier dude. Although Evan Neal has lost 30 pounds since the end of the collegiate season, he looks like a completely different player, super slim, right?
Yeah.
And so, so that alleviated a lot of my concerns. But I do think Ekwonu gives you the positional flexibility to where he can either be a tackle or he can be a guard. I'm not so sure Evan Neal can play inside given the fact that he's so tall and the constant bend, the constant wear and tear on the knees for guards, right? But yeah, I think but my worry, I think this is how I think Joe Douglas sees it. I think him and Robert Saleh said it, that they're going to have a knockdown, drag him out fight over whether to take a pass rusher or an offensive lineman, right? I think the way that they see it is we can either take Ekwonu and then get less value for a Becton or a Fant, right? Like less value. Or we take the pass rusher to pair with Carl Lawson, and I think that's what they opt for. Now, what pass rusher they take, I mean, I would take Kayvon Thibodeau. I think Kayvon Thibodeau is the best player in this class.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of talk about like him building his brand, but ultimately at the end of the day, I don't really care about that stuff, right? Like I don't think I could care less about a kid worrying about their brand and what their life post football would be like when they're playing such a violent game, right? And they have to think about like, okay, well, how am I going to set up my family long term? On the field, he's a dog, right? He's an animal. He's already got refined pass rushing moves. He kind of reminds me of Javon Curse, the former pass rusher from the Titans. Like he's got that kind of freakish ability. You pair him and Lawson, right? That makes the entire defense better because now you can't double team Quinnen. Right? You can't double team Carl Lawson because this kid is going to wreck every right tackle that he's against. And then you can't double team John Franklin Myers on the inside. So now you have 4 guys with a really good set of pass rushing moves, right? That are going to be after the quarterback. That makes your cornerbacks better. That makes your linebackers better, which outside of CJ Mosley, there is no starting quality linebacker on this team. It's just CJ Mosley, right?
That needs to be addressed as well. But
there's folks that'll tell you that linebacker's not a concern, and that's worrisome to me because it's like literally CJ Mosley and a bunch of guys. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if it were me, I'd take the pass rusher. I don't want to take a guy at 4 where I have to then figure out where he's going to play, and where he's going to play might dictate me trading the guy that I took at 11 2 years ago, or the guy who played really good left tackle last year. But I'll be honest, Andres, I'm worried about George Fant in the sense of like we've seen who he was for a really, really long time. And then they move him to left tackle. He has a good year last year, right? Okay. I worry that he's the guy we've seen more of than the guy who had this one good year. And so to bank on him as being the future left tackle, long term, some people have said, well, maybe he's playing his best ball after he turns 30. Nobody plays their best ball after they turn 40, except for Tom Brady. Tom Brady's the only person I've seen that's gotten better after 30, right? So, and offensive linemen in particular do not get better after they turn 30. So he had a good season last year. It's a good scheme for him, whatever the case may be. But to bank on him being the guy and then moving Becton and then drafting Ekwonu feels like a really bad scenario. It just feels like a bad scenario because what happens if Fant reverts back to who he's been? Then now you've moved Becton. Now you need to go get a right tackle next year because you're going to move Ekwonu from right tackle to left tackle after you let Becton walk. You're not going to get a comp pick because you're going to spend so much money in free agency next year. So ultimately, what are you doing? It's almost like a loss. So I think the Jets are going to take the edge rusher, and I think that's a smart thing to do. I do not think they'll take an offensive lineman at 4.
Yeah, I mean, it just creates a messy situation
Yeah.
as well. As good as Aquanu is, I mean, would you say you would take Jermaine Johnson over? Let's say KT goes
Hmm.
to Detroit, which is
Yeah.
where I'm probably hearing that
Yeah.
is the other spot that I like him from what we've been hearing and from everything. It's Detroit or probably New York are the two
Yeah.
spots. Would you entertain? Say Icky's there. I know you because you're high on him as a prospect.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you want to avoid that situation. Would you prepare you to take Jermaine Johnson or another pass rusher over him? I mean,
So
how far
yeah.
does it go? Because
Yeah. No, so Jermaine Johnson is the only other pass rusher I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like I
okay,
would I feel much more comfortable taking Jermaine Johnson at 10. I think that's better value for him. I think 4 is a little high for him. I think that he's not as refined as he doesn't have the ceiling as a pass rusher that Kayvon Thibodeau or Aiden Hutchinson or even David Ajabu have, right? Like
yeah,
I don't think he has that kind of ceiling. But what you're getting with Jermaine Johnson is like Jermaine Johnson's a solid player. Like I tweeted this out like maybe like a couple of days ago. I don't think Joe Douglas has the luxury to go and take a swing for a guy like like a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley or Kyle Hamilton or whatever. I don't think he has the luxury to do that. Where it's you're taking swings at guys who you hope are going to pan out, right? Who you hope are going to be complete difference makers. And Stingley, I think is safe. Is if Stingley is healthy, I think he's the best cornerback prospect in this class.
yeah,
But like you have to worry about if he's going to be healthy, right? With Sauce Gardner, the competition was weak in college, so it's like okay, yes, you didn't allow a touchdown through your entire career, but who did you really go against in college, right? So that's something you got to worry about. And then with Kyle Hamilton, the measurables aren't really what you look for, and the safety position is so devalued in the NFL now, right? It's kind of like the running back position. It's you can get the same kind of productivity, all pro productivity, day 2, day 3, than you do taking a guy in day 1. So I say all that to say Jermaine Johnson is a safe prospect. Jermaine Johnson is going to stop the run, and he's going to get you double-digit sacks, right?
yeah.
But I don't think Jermaine Johnson will ever be a guy that's like in the defensive player of the year running, which is what I think Kayvon Thibodeau can be. I think Kayvon Thibodeau has that kind of potential where he's a game wrecker, right? And that's kind of what you need on this defense. I think that you drafted Quinnen Williams 3rd overall, which and Andres, you know me, you've known me for a long time. I thought that was a mistake, right? But you draft him at 3 overall. When you draft a guy at 3, you need him to be Aaron Donald like, right? Like that's kind of what you need him to be.
Yeah.
He has not been that. Carl Lawson got injured last year. You need a game changer on this defense, and I think that's Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know that Jermaine Johnson would be that, but Jermaine Johnson is a safe prospect, and he's a lot safer than a lot of the other guys. Like I wouldn't take Trayvon Walker at 4. Like I have Trayvon Walker ranked like 48th on my big board. So like it's absurd to me to like hear like if he hits he could be this. If he hits he could be Jadeveon Clowney, right? Like that's who I think he is if he hits. That's not somebody I'm taking at 4 overall. Like I'm not taking this version of Jadeveon Clowney at 4 overall. So Jermaine Johnson's the only other edge rusher. But I will tell you, this is where it gets interesting. If Kayvon is gone to Houston, like you say, or say Detroit, right? So say Hutchinson goes 1, Kayvon goes 2. Although I will say, I think Detroit might take Malik Willis at 2, just because I think they may see that like, okay, we can get the quarterback here and then maybe a safety in the back end, as opposed to taking like a pass rusher and then hoping the quarterback falls to you at the end of round 1, right? So I think you could see that. But say, for example, say Hutchinson and Kayvon go 1 and 2, and then Houston takes Aquanu or Kyle Hamilton at 3, right? If Houston were to take Kyle Hamilton and on the board at 4 are Aquanu and Jermaine Johnson, I think the Jets will take Aquanu. I do not think they'll take Jermaine Johnson. And that would worry me, because in that scenario, as much as I love Aquanu, I think, again, the same argument for Kayvon is the same argument I'll make for Jermaine Johnson, even though he has a lower ceiling, in my opinion. You got to get the edge rusher. You like creating a log jam on the offensive line is kind of it's hard to pull off.
It is. And I hear, and Connor Rogers, speaks with a lot of, he knows what he's talking about, and he talks, he's very high on Ekwani. Obviously he's number 1 on his board, and he's very high, and he actually is more okay with it, I guess, than I just can't get my head around it. As much as I really do love Ekwani as a prospect, the problems that it concerns, something I know they say don't draft for need, but I don't think drafting Jermaine Johnson at 4 is necessarily too much of a reach when you've really got to get the position locked down, and then you can move on to building the rest of your team, taking receiver at 10, and it just makes things a lot easier. They made the case for you get a corner at 4, you maybe take a receiver at 10, and then you get someone like a Nebukedi at in the second round, or you maybe trade up for someone like that. I don't know about that. Like there's a lot of picks from 10 to 35 A lot of things can change. You don't always know if you can draft up. What
Mm-hmm.
happens if there's a run? You miss out on it. And I just feel, and then on top of that, you're missing out of that. And then you look at this situation on the offensive line, and then you go, okay, yeah, what do we do? Do we trade Becton now? I mean, his first season, I mean, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but I think he had a really, really promising rookie season, even if it was injury hampered. When he was on the field, there was a lot of good performance from him, other than, like I said, it was just being nicked up and being in and out was really frustrating. But overall, his performance, and he was really showing that he was dominant when he was playing. I don't want to give up on a guy like that.
Right.
And do you move Fant and then you have a Kwanu? That's the only way I would see it, because AVT and Laken Tomlinson. I'm not putting Icky a guard now that we've got Laken. So I'm like, what do? You got to make a decision. If you make that decision because you love Ikwanu, then they better have a plan saying, well, if we have this plan, then we're going to kind of resolve this by trading here and then find another way to get a pass rusher. Because yes, Johnson drops to 10. Great, take him. And then would you do at receiver? You got to trade up for a receiver? Yeah. Oh, great. But then you can't guarantee you can move up. Sometimes someone else will take. They're like, okay, we'll trade with you, or we'll trade with the Lions. Okay, we'll trade with the Lions instead. Then you're screwed. Yeah. And it's like, and so it's almost like you're losing the control by taking Icky. You're letting the board get away from you in other positions for a position that you already have in house pretty solid. I don't know. It's just something that I just can't get my head around. As much as Icky is a great prospect, I just can't get my head around taking that position and then not being able to fill other needs. So
right. Or let's say you take Icky, Becton's healthy, Fant is good. Where are you playing him? You've now taken the 4th overall pick and sat him on the bench.
Well, no, they're saying he wouldn't, right? I mean, that's
But where would he play? Where would you play him, right? Like that. Like, are you going to
else? You drop Fant. Fant sits on the bench, or Mackay sits on the bench. And then losing value. And
then loses value, right? So now you can't get the same trade value. And the thing is, and the thing is to move Fant to the bench, like the argument that folks have made is that you can't move Fant to the bench because of how good he played, right? Like how he stepped in. You'll lose the locker room that way. So now here it is. Like now, so you're gonna bench Fant. Move Becton back to left tackle, because realistically you should not be playing right tackle. But sure, you move him to left tackle. Mm-hmm. You're going to put Icky at right tackle. So now you've benched Fant, losing the locker room, as folks are worried about, to start Fant. And then you're not going to get trade value for Fant either, because you've now benched him, right? So that's it just opens up. It's not the simplest path forward. It's not the simplest path forward.
No, I mean, the only way you can see it is that, obviously Fant's on his last year of his deal. And if Becton comes in great shape, you take Icky, you start with the 2 young bucks, right? You start with them. And if Becton does get injured, because, everyone says, he's an injury waiting to happen. Well, I think it's a bit harsh on him, but everyone obviously doubts his durability until he proves otherwise. Well, then you've got Fant as insurance, like Moses was there last year. Mm-hmm. That's where you sell it to the locker room, that you've got to go with the 2 guys who are going to be here probably for the future, right? And rather than the guy who's going to be only here for 1 year left of his deal. So that's the only way I can reconcile it, is that they say, Fant is the one who drops. Because I would be really upset if they trade Becton right now, because you're not going to get the value that I think is potentially there with him. You're talking about a guy who can be a dominant left tackle, I believe, if he can get his his physicality in check.
Gets his weight under order.
He's going to be a dad soon. You're a dad, I'm a dad. These things change you. Sometimes they don't, but a lot of people
more often than they do. You
change as a person. The moment that baby boy or girl comes out, you're changing as a person, and I feel like I want to be on the other side of that. I want to see the rest of his career as he matures a bit and maybe gets himself, because the physicality and what he can do is unique. And I don't want to give up on that for one first round. I mean, look what the Dolphins got for Larry Tunsil. They set themselves up. We wouldn't get that for Becton, but Becton could be way worth that as well if he gets where he is. So I'm very nervous about the whole situation, because it's going to get very messy. But hopefully KT falls, we take him, because I think he's there. They'll take him above everyone else. I just worry about what the Lions do. And so let's hope that Walker goes number 1 overall, and then Hutchinson goes to the hometown team, and then Icky goes to Houston, and then we just get KT, and it's easy. No one has to fight. No one has to stress. We can just all relax and have a good time with the rest of the draft, because If KT comes in at 4, the rest is fine. Like, you take a receiver.
The rest is gravy.
Take whatever receiver that you like at 10.
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
whatever positions you like. For the rest of it, I'm relaxed. So we'll see how that goes. But no, but it's obviously we're all sitting here,
Yes.
in our own space. It's just kind of, and this is why Twitter gets so rowdy, because we're just so nervous about
Yeah.
where we're going, and we just want so much success, and we're desperate for it. And right now, it's obviously not there yet. We want to get there, so we just get crazy. We absolutely do, and I think there's a kind of the worry of like bad decision making from the front office over
Mm-hmm.
years, of like what kind of pick is that? Like, you kind of just like, you can't believe,
Yeah.
like, Hackenberg,
PTSD.
right? Like,
PTSD.
so I think I haven't had that with Joe yet. Like, in
Yeah.
terms of the top picks, they've all been logical. Mackay and,
Yeah.
Denzel hasn't worked out, but I like the pick at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I like some of the picks further down the board, even though they haven't worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So on the draft day, I've liked the process, especially getting
Yeah.
someone like a Bryce Hall where they got him. Love it.
Right.
And then last year was amazing. The return so far has been really fantastic. So
Right.
yeah, I like the process with Joe's two drafts. Obviously, one's been more successful than the other, but hopefully that process stays logical and it kind of goes where we hope it, and we don't get this kind of crazy like curveballs that just completely knock you out. Right at the beginning of the draft at the fourth pick, because that's not where you want to start off the draft. Like, because the rest of it, you're just gonna be sulking for the rest of it. So hopefully not, but. Yeah, anyway, we're going to get into the next segment. So, yeah, the next segment we're going to do is kind of, I called it Move 'em Up. So, basically, I kind of tasked Dalbin with a few guys who, just to introduce some guys that were maybe in the kind of mid-round section, or, a bit lower, in consensus than where he is. And he feels that maybe they should be heralded as first-round guys, or guys who should be moved up the board. So, Dalbin, do you want to fire off your first prospect that you feel needs a bit more recognition?
Yeah, for sure. So and when you sent me the segment list, I was like, all right. I was like, there's guys that I think are going to be overdrafted. Like I mentioned Trayvon Walker, right? I think he's going to be overdrafted. I find it a little alarming that Aiden Hutchinson's higher than Kayvon Thibodeau. That's the consensus, but not to the point that like I'm like, okay, not to the anger that I have with Trayvon Walker being a top 3 pick. But I think so. I think Nakobe Dean is a guy that I think should go higher. He's a modern linebacker, right? I think that where I saw him mocked at the end of the season was like 31, 32. And I think honestly, like you're talking about a guy that if the Eagles took him with their first round pick, I think he solidifies that defense in the middle. They haven't had a leader like him in the middle of that defense in a really long time. So Nakobe Dean's a guy, and he was the leader of that Georgia defense, that all-world Georgia defense, right? And I think when you talk about I think what we're seeing a shift to is this positionless football. And I've talked about this before, right? Where on offense, what you're trying to do is you get your quarterback and 5 best weapons, whoever they are, right? Whether it's 2 tight ends, a running back, 2 wide receivers, whether it's 4 wide receivers and a running back, right? We saw the Panthers do a lot of that, right? With Christian McCaffrey lined up out wide with DJ Moore, Terrence Marshall, Robbie Anderson, right? Yeah. You want to make sure you get your best offensive weapons on the field. Defenses are countering that now by the nickel defense being the base defense, right? So you go 4 pass rushers. You saw the Jets try to do it with Hamza Nasruddin and Jamie and Sherwood, where you take a safety, convert him into a linebacker. Because again, if you can cover as a safety, I can teach you how to tackle, right? Like I can teach you how to do that. But if you can cover, that's a skill that I need in this defense, right? So you go to more 4-2-5 looks defensively. Nakobe Dean is a linebacker that doesn't have to come off the field. He's a and that's what you're going to want to see if you're going to take a linebacker in the first round now in this NFL, is a linebacker that does not come off the field. And he's a guy that, again, I've seen him, somebody had him mock 38 to the Jets. I thought that was crazy. I'm like, listen, if a team is smart, and I think the Eagles do have a smart forward-thinking front office, they'll take him in the top half of round 1. Do not let him fall to round 2, because I think the Jets take him at 35 or 38. So he's a guy on defense that I'm like, you know what? He's a guy that needs to be talked about because again, a modern linebacker can cover, doesn't have to come off the field, and is a leader. And he's on the younger side, right? You don't want to take an older prospect that their best football, this is their ceiling. Like I think he has a higher ceiling that he's shown so far.
No, we love Dean on this podcast. We really do. I mean, it's not. We hope that he falls to 35.
Yeah.
we looked at the picks that we have 4, 10, 35, 38. You think he's going to fall in between it. So we kind of gone away from him as a guy who we've really locked in on. Mm-hmm. But Dean is up there in terms of the love from this podcast is up there in terms of where we were with AVT, and then AVT looked to be out of our range, and we made it happen last year. So we'll see about that. I mean, the funny thing with Philadelphia is that's a meme that goes around, like they don't take linebackers in the first round, right? So, so because I've got a mate who's a Philly fan as well, he's an Eagle fan, so. They say, it's just something that goes around Eagles Twitter. They just don't, how he does not invest in a first round linebacker. Maybe he should change that. But yeah, no, Dean.
Right.
Dean is a great player, and I think it's obviously his height, his kind of, and his he hasn't ran. I don't think he hasn't ran. So that might if he wants to drop to 35. It's fine. I mean, I'm looking at
with CJ Mosley.
we're looking at people we love. Obviously, on this podcast as well, we love Chad Moomer as well from Wyoming as a guy.
Yeah. It's a good linebacker class.
Yeah,
it's a good linebacker class.
And we're like, okay, we'll take him with 38 or whatever like that. But
yeah.
If Dean falls to 35, and when we had our segment last week's show, we had we drafted different positions at the different groups. I had a list of prospects from each position group, and I put Dean at 30. I put Nakobe Dean at 35 because he's there on every mock draft. He's not going in the first round in many. So I thought, let's put him there to see how that looks in terms of if he's there at 35, people can't help himself, and that's what happened. That the first person that had a choice at him took him because you just can't pass up on the values. No, that's great. We'll see. I think Dean will fall. I think you're right. I think he shouldn't, but I think he will.
I do too.
And people are going to be regretting it when he's in the NFL, and he's a great player. I think it's a bit like the guy from
Deion Jones from Atlanta, or Deion Jones from Atlanta, or Darius Leonard. Darius exactly.
Leonard, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They sleep on because he's not quite big enough, and they have some doubts here and there. And then a great player falls into the second, and then you see what top of the player. So we will see when Kobe Dean falls. Who's another player that you'd like to shout out who needs a bit more recognition?
George Pickens, man. Pickens.
Okay, and another favorite. David loves George Pickens. Yeah.
No, and so when we talk about if the Jets decide to go edge at 4 and then corner at 10, let's say that's what they opt to do, right? So let's say they walk out of the first round with Kayvon Thibodeau and Derek Stingley. Say that's what they opt to do, right? And that means that they're putting their chips on, like, okay, well, what receiver are we going to take in round 2? Similar to what we did last year with Elijah Moore. George Pickens is the guy that, again, had George Pickens not gotten hurt, I think George Pickens is wide receiver 1 in this class. Like, his tape was that good, and then he gets hurt. Him and Justin Ross, I think their injuries really shook up the wide receiver rankings for a lot of folks, right? Because they were 1A and 1B going into this collegiate season. They then get hurt, right? And so in turn, like, that allowed for folks to kind of forget how good both of them are. Right, like I've
Justin
seen some
Ross
mocks,
is like 5th, 6th round at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I've seen some mocks where you see him go to Kansas City in round 5, and I'm like, listen, if the Chiefs take him in round 5, that's a guy that probably makes like 2 or 3 Pro Bowls or whatever for the Chiefs, right? But so you look at George Pickens, he's got the size, he's got the speed, the body control, the hands. I think that if you look at what this Jets team is missing, just from a stylistic standpoint in this receiver room, they don't have a power forward. They don't have somebody to go up and get these balls. Pickens can do that. Same thing Drake London can do. It's Drake London.
That's exactly. Yeah.
Right. Same thing Drake London can do, and also it's also something that Treylon Burks can do too. Right. Like those are bigger receivers that can use their size to shield themselves from DBs to make it easier for Zach Wilson. Right. The guys that you've seen, and Garrett Wilson, so and I will tell you, so I love Garrett Wilson's game. I also love Chris Olave's game. Olave's 6'2", about a 189. Garrett Wilson's 6'1", 210. But they both play a little bit bigger. But just not as big as Drake London, Treylon Burks, and Pickens. And then when you see Jamison Williams constantly mocked to the team, Jamison Williams reminds me a lot of Deshaun Jackson. Like, and that's not a bad player, but on this team, I don't think that's what you need. I think you need a bully on this offense, right? And also, I will say, man,
Zach as well.
And for Zach. But I will say, I think the Jets realized that too. They went and got CJ Uzoma, who's a big dude. He's not a small dude, right? They went and got Laken Tomlinson, a big, like very clearly they were trying to change the attitude of this offense after Fletcher Cox called them soft, right? Over the season where and the Jets were upset about that. They are trying to change the attitude here, which is why I don't think Jamison Williams is an option, right, at 10, and if we had to settle on a receiver at 10, I think you're looking at Drake London at that point because he's a bigger receiver, jump ball catches, he plays big. I mean, I like his game. I think he does have some more work to do regarding his route running, but I like his game. But if the Jets opt to say, you know what, we're going to go edge corner, or offensive line, we're going to take Icky at 4, and then we're going to try to take Jermaine Johnson at 10, right? Then I think you take George Pickens at 35 because Pickens gives this offense what it needs. It's a bigger receiver. They need a bigger receiver. Corey Davis plays smaller than 6'3". Elijah Moore is a smaller receiver. You don't have a bully on the outside. George Pickens will give you that. And I think Pickens, had he not gotten hurt, would have been the best wide receiver in this class for sure. I have him ranked. I will tell you, I have him. So I have Olave at 1, Wilson at 2, Burks at 3, Pickens at 4, and I have London at 5.
Okay.
I think Pickens' film is a little bit better than London's, but again, you're talking about 5 receivers that are really jammed together really closely. Like you're talking about, like all 5 of them are top 30 players in this class to me.
Yeah, so whoever they want to take.
It's a preference thing at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, you do trust the team. I think they did such a good job when you combined this coaching staff and and the front office staff, and that was their first draft last year. I think they nailed a lot of that value throughout the draft, and I think you just trust the coaches and the front office to pick the guys that they feel. Even like I said, I think David even said with Trayvon Walker, it's like if they take him at 4, you just trust the staff and say that they see something that's worthy at 4. So that's probably him prepping in case the worst case scenario happens for him. If you want to throw one more out there in terms of a guy who deserves a bit more love.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned how I have Trayvon Walker, and I'm looking at my big board. I said I had him at 45, but he's really where is he? I just saw him. He's at 55 actually, so not 45, 55. Okay, well, okay. But a guy that I have higher than him, and there's been a lot of talk, and I think you've seen this on Twitter from Jet fans who think that we should take an interior defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not of the belief that we should do that, okay? Because I think John Franklin Myers should play inside. I think you have Q, you have Sheldon Rankins, Jonathan Marshall. I think it's a good rotation on the inside, right? And Nathan Shepard you brought back. So that's 5 bodies that should be on the inside. You have Carl Lawson. I think they're going to address edge with either Kayvon or Jermaine Johnson, right? You signed Josh Martin to be and you have Bryce Huff. So again, that's 9 bodies already. So I don't think you need to add an interior defensive lineman.
No.
But if you were, Travis Jones from Connecticut, the defensive tackle, is the guy that I think you add. And there's been talk of the Jets should take the monster, Jordan Davis, right? Like take him. And it's concerning to me because I think if you look at him and Devontae Wyatt, they're going to go much higher than I think you want to invest in an interior defensive lineman. And it's the Quinnen Williams argument all over again. Like, why would I take an interior defensive lineman in the top 10 when, similar to safety, I can get a guy that's going to produce to the same level in round 2 or round 3? And I think that's Travis Jones from Connecticut. I think
if he gets there.
If he gets there,
getting a lot of love.
Exactly, it's starting to change, right?
Yeah.
But so Travis Jones is another one of the guys like Icky, right? Where in September I was like, listen, man, like there's a guy who the first step is explosive. It's hard to get a hand on him because he's so physical, right? Like he just uses his hands in a violent manner, right? Mm-hmm. And he jumps off the screen in a way that most interior defensive linemen just don't, right? Like it's very hard to do that as an interior defensive lineman because you're taking up 2 blocks. You're trying to shed blocks. You're really trying to set the table for the linebackers behind you, right? So it's very hard for you to jump, but it's not like Connecticut was like a powerhouse or anything like that. And he jumped off the page, right? And so I think he's a guy that, to your point, you're starting to see him mock like towards the end of round 1, maybe Green Bay even. I actually saw one mock draft that had him going at 23 to the pick that they got from the Raiders for Devontae Adams. And I was like, wow, that's the highest I've seen him. And that's changed in the last couple months, right? Because again, 3 months ago, I would have told you, yeah, you could get him at 60 with the 3rd round pick. You could get him there. And now you're seeing him jump into the end of round 1. And I think that's really good value for him. He's a guy that, again, you draft him. And, when you mentioned Darius Leonard, right? Also Deion Jones in Atlanta. Guys that get taken like a little bit later, but just outproduce their draft slot. He's a guy that will outproduce his draft slot. And he's a guy that you wonder, like, well, what did we miss, right? What didn't we see with that? And I think if the Jets, if somehow he fell, right, he would be the only interior defensive lineman I would even entertain in the top 40 is him. If he fell, like I said, because I don't think Davis or Wyatt are going to fall, but he would be the one that I'd be like, if he fell, I'd entertain it. But I don't think you need another body there. But if Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh felt that they did, Travis Jones is a guy that I think you take and you plug him in right in the middle next to Q and just rotate bodies. Bodies.
I mean, that's what they like to do, though. They like to rotate. Yeah. Sometimes they like to swap out the whole line. And we had issues last year where we would swap out the line almost to the B line. It was very much the A and the B line, and then the B line would struggle. You would see certain plays that happened, and it would be like, who was on the field? Well, Hugh wasn't on the field, JFM was on the field. You're like, Okay, who wasn't the field? Shepard and Rankins, or like you're like, okay. So why is that? So that's the only bit that I think about whether they would take someone higher up in the first 2 or 3 rounds because of having that rotation that Salah loves to have, where he wants everyone to be as good as possible, so they're interchangeable as much. You probably don't get as people as interchangeable as each other, but if you can get close to the level of the two lines, the performance doesn't drop off as much, and you can rotate fresh bodies, and the freshness of each person will kind of make up the difference that you're dropping when you bring in the second line. So hopefully, like I say, we'll see what happens. But yeah, Travis Jones definitely a name I've been hearing a lot about since the Senior Bowl. He blew up the Senior Bowl, and been doing really, really well since then. So I think he may go ahead of us, and then you're looking at options in the 3rd and 4th round potentially just to fill out, maybe add another person to rotate through. I think, there's so many prospects where, like, we look at it and go, how is this person, not, what are we sleeping on? People are sleeping on this, the overanalyzing everything, and then people start to drop, and the traits people start to go up a bit more, like Trayvon Walker. That's probably why he's moving up, because the physical ability is so high. So, no, it's fascinating to go through, and like I said, I'm sure there's 25 prospects that you probably do the same to, but we probably don't have the time for that. Before we end the show, I'm going to start rolling through as we head towards the draft. I want to get to some draft predictions, just general ones, not necessarily JKB Jets ones, but not Jets related, and we're going to rotate on our last show before the draft. We'll do on with the host, but we'll do it with a few guests as well to kind of get them on the board as well. So, do you want to throw out your 3 predictions for the draft?
Yeah. So one, I think the Jets make 3 first-round picks, not 2. So I think that's that. I think you're going to see them do that. I think one way or the other, the Jets end up with Tyler Linderbaum. One way or the other. I think that Joe Douglas's reported interest in Ryan Jensen lets me know that he very much views it as like this was not just a Laken Tomlinson one move fix. This was a how do we get Connor McGovern off this team fix. And I think they find a way to land Tyler
Those
Linderbaum.
Two probably go together, you think?
He's
the third pick.
Yep, I
so
think
you saw Mel Kiper's draft then, right, where we trade.
I did. So the thing is, I've been thinking that, and I've said it a few times. I'm like, Tyler Linderbaum is a Joe Douglas like player, like you can just tell, right? And Tyler Linderbaum's a guy that I think like he checked in at 303, right? He's going to continue to gain a little bit of weight, right? Because folks thought he was a little undersized, but Tyler Linderbaum's a guy that for a long time will be an all-pro in this league. Like he's just going to come in, he's going to do his job, right? And I think he's going to be very good at the next level. And I think if you told me that the Jets walk out of this offseason with Elijah Vera Tucker, Tyler Linderbaum, and Mekhi Becton as the 3 offensive line pieces that are going to grow with Zach Wilson, and then you're just going to figure out how to replace Laken and George Fant, I think you're in good shape. I think you're in good shape long-term.
That is crazy compared to where we were before. And we've got history with the centers, right? We've got Kevin Mawai, we've
Nick
got
Mangold,
Nick Mangold.
right?
Those are the 2 that I've growing up with, but we have other centers down in the past, but
and he would be the next in line of that, and I think folks are underestimating like how important center play is to Zach Wilson's development. Like Connor McGovern not having his back in public and like all that stuff weighs on you. That stuff weighs on you, man. Yeah. And then the third one is that I think the Jets. I think you see them pick 3 times. I think they leave the draft with Tyler Linderbaum. The third one is I think Kayvon Thibodeau's the pick at 4. I feel very good about that. I think that Ike Ekwonu will be on the board, but I think he's going to go to the Giants. I don't think he's going to go to the Jets. I think the Jets take the pass rusher because I think Robert Saleh saw his defense take another step when they added Nick Bosa. And I think he views Kayvon Thibodeau in the same light. I think he views him in the sense of like, if we get another pass rusher here, that unlocks Quinnen. That unlocks John Franklin Myers. That unlocks Sheldon Rankins. That unlocks everything that you want to do because it puts less pressure on Carl Lawson being the one guy. And I think that's what you're going to see. So those are my 3. I think Kayvon Thibodeau's the pick at 4. I think the Jets pick at 3, and one way or the other they leave with Tyler Linderbaum in the draft. And I'll tell you this, man, Andres, if they leave the draft with Kayvon Thibodeau, Garrett Wilson, and Tyler Linderbaum. I don't care about the rest. They can take all punters for day 2 and 3 for all I care.
No, I love it. That's the thing about you going first on the predictions, Dalbin, is that you've hit, one of the mine was actually the 3 picks in the first round, which is the one I was thinking about. So you get to go first. You take that one. That one's your one, which is a good thing. But no, I love all of that you said. And if, I really hope that Thibodeau falls to 4. I mean, it just makes things, it
so much easier.
It just everything, because I don't know. You really hope, and I think it all happens. What does Detroit do is going to be a big thing, because I do hear that they do really like Linderbaum, but I think if Hutchinson's there for them, they take him. If not, it could be Thibodeau, and then we're kind of a bit nervous as we go to the 4th pick. But we'll see. Hopefully, I hope your predictions are right. I hope.
Too.
I hope they're right. But yeah, we'll see. We'll note them down, and we'll see how we go from there. So the week's shows going forward, we're going to be having a few more guests as we head towards the draft. We'll be announcing plans on our Twitter and social media of like when we're going to record. We're going to obviously change the recording schedule to kind of match kind of pre-draft. We want to get a show done maybe on the Friday after the first round, and maybe a show kind of soon after the 3rd day of the draft as well. So keep an eye out on any kind of announcements on that. But Dalbin, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Thank you for helping me out on this Easter weekend. Like I said, everyone else left me and they went off gallivanting around the world to different places. Is there anything you want to shout out, kind of work you're doing, podcast, anything like that you want to shout out?
No, and thank you so much for having me on, man. I we joked about this before, but I could talk to you for hours, so I'm grateful to talk with you. Hopefully we get out, to London this within the next year or so we can do a live pod. You guys can follow me on Twitter at @DA_Osorio. We have a ton of video stuff coming from the TOJ team. And just keep rocking with us, man. It's gonna be a fun draft.
It is, especially if it doesn't go crazy at 4. Like I said, I'm just so nervous about that one. But after that, let's see how it goes. But yeah, it should be a fun draft either way. We'll be busy. We'll be chatting anyway. So thanks a lot for joining us on this one. And we'll catch you next week.